Hello, I'm Anika from Made to Sew. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to use Ban-Rol in your garment hems. Now, Ban-Rol is an interfacing or stabilizing product that is commonly used in waistbands or even in belts of garments. We're going to be using Ban-Rol in this technique to perfect hems in tricky fabrics. I'm going to be sharing how to use Ban-Rol to sew a baby hem, a small 2 to 3 millimeter rolled hem, but you can also use this technique on more stable fabrics, and it can be useful on curves as well, such as shirt hems. If you're interested in sewing baby hems, you may want to take a look at my other tutorials. I have two. One is a rolled hem standard baby hem tutorial where I go over the techniques, and that's best for a beginner. The next video is more focused on baby hems in tricky lightweight fabrics. I show you some tips for sewing and working with these tricky fabrics, such as using tissue paper or a stabilizer to support them. I'll pop a link to both of those videos here and in the description box below. It can be a good idea to look at both the tissue paper method as well as this Ban-Rol method to work out what works best for you and your individual sewing machine. You may also find that you need to use one technique for certain fabric, so it's always great to have other techniques in your repertoire. Let's start by looking at what Ban-Rol is. Ban-Rol is a firm stabilizer that's generally made from synthetic fibers. It usually comes on a roll, so can be purchased in a continuous length to your liking. It has a stiff, firm hand, which makes it perfect for its purpose in waistbands, to stabilize waistbands and to prevent them from rolling. Let's talk about how to use it when we're hemming a garment. Begin by purchasing a piece of Ban-Rol that measures the circumference of your hem. You may need to measure this to work out the size that you need. If you're after a standard size that you could use again, I would aim for about 3 meters, 3 to 4 yards. Begin by preparing your Ban-Rol. You will want to use a seam ripper or an awl to push under and remove the warp threads. The warp threads are the threads that are running lengthwise on the Ban-Rol, aligned with the long edges. Once you've released one or two of these threads, you will be able to grab hold of them and pull them to remove them from the roll of Ban-Rol. It's usually a good idea to do this to 1 or 2 threads and then trim the Ban-Rol to ensure that it is a perfect width. Generally, straight out of the box, there can be some discrepancy, and you can see that on my sample here. So grabbing a pair of scissors, I'm going to cut right up next to the remaining lengthwise warp threads on my Ban-Rol, removing any of those little horizontal weft threads. This will then provide me with a perfect edge to continue the technique. Work to release more of the warp threads from your Ban-Rol. You want to remove as many as you need until the area without these warp threads is the size of the hem that you want to sew. That might be 1/8 of an inch if you're working on a small baby hem. It could be 1/4 of an inch or 5 millimeters for a shirt hem, or maybe larger, 3/8, 1 centimeter, 1/2 an inch. You can prepare different pieces of Ban-Rol with different widths to cover the multitude of hem widths that you may need to sew. Alternatively, you can prepare either side of the Ban-Rol with a different hem width, or cut the piece of Ban-Rol in half. The good news about this Ban-Rol hemming technique is that you can reuse your piece of Ban-Rol on multiple hems. This allows you to create a few pieces of Ban-Rol with different hem widths. I store mine loosely folded with a paper clip, as when they're tightly rolled, it can make the hemming technique a little bit trickier. To use the Ban-Rol in our hemming, we're going to take the piece of Ban-Rol and position it onto the right side of our fabric. We want to align the edge of the Ban-Rol, where you have these weft threads remaining, like a little comb, with the raw edge of your fabric. At the sewing machine, you are going to sew the Ban-Rol onto your fabric. You want to position the needle so that it sits next to the lengthwise warp threads of the Ban-Rol. If your fabric is cut on the bias, you will be able to align the raw edges together. If your fabric is not on the bias and it has the tendency to fray, you may wish to position the Ban-Rol ever so slightly away from the edge and trim down your garment fabric afterwards. Sew all the way around your garment hem, attaching the Ban-Rol onto the material. When you get back to the start, you will want to overlap the Ban-Rol, and I usually do this by about 1 to 2 inches, 3 to 5 centimeters. You don't have to cut your Ban-Rol if you plan to use it on future garments where the hem will have a greater circumference. However, if you have a large amount of Ban-Rol remaining, ensure that you support it as you move your work around. It can have the tendency to pull out of the hem that you've just sewn. Another option is to work with strips of Ban-Rol rather than one long piece. Trim any discrepancy from your hem so that the edge of the hem is aligned with those weft threads on your Ban-Rol. Once you've attached the Ban-Rol to your hem, you're then going to work to press the material away from the Ban-Rol. Take your garment and position it with the right side facing up. Fold the piece of Ban-Rol away from the hem and press the join between the garment and the Ban-Rol. If you're working on a curve, you will find that the Ban-Rol won't sit completely flat, and that's absolutely fine. The key here is that you just want to press that join between the Ban-Rol and the garment hem to ensure that you have a nice pressed finished hem of your garment. Once you've pressed the hem from the front side of the garment, you will then turn the fabric over to have the wrong side facing up. Fold the Ban-Rol over the edge to create the hem. The hem widths will be the size of the Ban-Rol that you created in the first step when you removed the warp threads. Press this in position. Once again, if your garment hem is curved, the Ban-Rol won't sit completely flat. Simply ensure a nice press at the exact hem edge. Then you will take your work back to the sewing machine and you will sew on the hem. You want to be sewing nice and close to that top folded edge of the hem, the edge that's close to the Ban-Rol, approximately a 1/16 of an inch away, 2 millimeters. You can use an edge stitching foot if that would help. I like to start and stop at the join of my Ban-Rol to secure and sew that section first. Just like with the first method, you don't want to be sewing through the warp threads of the Ban-Rol here. We're only sewing through the garment fabric as well as those weft comb-like threads of the Ban-Rol, which will be contained in this hem. Work your way around the hem, backstitching at the end. Once finished, you will then work to pull the Ban-Rol out of your hem. I like to hold my hem firmly and work quite close to the hem to ensure that I'm not stretching or distorting my material. You should find that the Ban-Rol comes out of the hem really easily, with your hem looking like this on completion. A baby hem that measures 2 to 3 millimeters in width, 1/8 of an inch. If you have accidentally sewn a warp thread on the Ban-Rol anywhere, then you will need to trim this to release it and remove the Ban-Rol from your material. This will mean that the Ban-Rol that you've used for this particular hem size would no longer be suitable for that particular hem width, as the comb size of the Ban-Rol will have increased. You will have to remove that warp thread and use it for a larger hem width. This hemming technique with Ban-Rol can be replicated on a variety of different materials and hem widths. Here is an example using a cotton for shirting. Give it a try on your next project, be that a baby hem or a shirt hem. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this class and that you learned something new. I'll see you in the next one.